Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and before we go any further, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on that bell notification. That way, when we are doing our thing, YouTube will let you know. Today, we're going to be having another episode of my board game collection, Shelf by Shelf, and today we're going to be covering shelf number 17, so let's get straight to it. So this right here is shelf number 17, and right here on the very front, you see Eldritch Horror, which is a game designed by Corey Konieczka and Nikki Valens and published by Fantasy Flight Games in their Arkham Horror line of games. This is a Cthulhu Mythos game where players are taking on the role of investigators trying to defeat monsters, acquire assets, equipment, spells, and weapons, and travel through the world. The map or the board is an entire map of the world. So this is a very global scale type of game. And players are doing everything they can to level up their characters, taking a bunch of different skill tests and 4 different attributes, all with the efforts of trying to close portals before the big bad guy, the ancient one or the elder one, breaks through this dimension and basically brings on the doom of our Earth as you know it. So this is a cooperative game for 1 to 8 players. I probably wouldn't recommend playing 8. Even 1 is tough to play solo. I do play solo from time to time, but I usually control 2 characters because I find that it's tough to cover enough space. And even though the game does make the difficulty, it adjusts the difficulty based on the player count, I'd rather play with 2 players and have the game be a little bit more difficult. Control 2 characters. That way I feel like I can cover more territory as far as the map is concerned, because there is lots of map to cover. This is a very thematic, enriching, immersive experience. There's lots of flavor text on the cards, lots of narrative text on different mythos cards, and encounter cards that you draw as the game progresses. Each of the characters has their different strengths and weaknesses, particular items that they may or may not start the game with, different stats as far as their attributes for skill tests, and their capacity to endure insanity and even health, their physical damage, right? Their stamina. Really cool game, lots of content just in the base game alone, and there are tons of expansions out there, as is the case with most Fantasy Flight games. That is Eldritch Horror. So let's see what's behind here. We have another Fantasy Flight game here. We have Star Wars, the card game, one of the living card games in Fantasy Flight's line of games. I'm not too sure if this one is still in print. This one's designed by Eric Lang. Again, it has a Star Wars intellectual property, and they came out with lots of expansions, big box expansions, small box expansions, little packs and booster packs that you can add to the gameplay experience. Each player takes on one of the 2 sides. You're either taking on the side of the rebellion or you're taking on the side of the empire, and it's very asymmetric. The different sides have different strengths. However, you're both trying to do somewhat of a similar thing. I think the goal for the dark side is to advance a particular dial all the way to 12, and certain things that you do throughout the game advance that dial and the objective of the empire. And then the Imperial, or the Rebellion I should say, are trying to defeat the dark side and acquire points otherwise in the meantime. It's been a while since I played this game, so it's a little bit vague in my memory right now. But it's a cool game. It's not one of my favorite LCGs. It's probably, out of all the LCGs I own, it's probably my least favorite. But again, I do like the LCG game, and I like the intellectual property, so it stays in my collection for the time being. Star Wars, the living card game. And what's behind here? Oh, goodness, this is the Fantasy Flight shelf, guys. So from top to bottom, we'll work our way from the top. On the very top here, we have the game of Roombound. 3rd edition, and I'm a big fan of the Roombound system. I'm a big fan of the Terranov system, as you can see by this shelf right here. And Roombound is like the flagship game for this brand, or at least it's the pioneer for this brand. And Roombound 2nd edition, very popular. I've covered it in a previous episode of my board game collection. But this one is 3rd edition. This was in print for a while, but I don't think it's in print currently. But in this game, basically you could play anywhere from 2 to 4. You can play solo with an expansion, and I play with some modified variants to play solo myself. Basically, I wouldn't recommend this for 3 or 4 players, because this is kind of like multiplayer solitaire, because you very rarely interact and engage with your opponents. So I'd rather just play this game solo or 2 players maximum. And basically you have this bad guy, this overlord you're trying to deal with in the base game. You either have Vorakesh, the evil necromancer, or you have the High Lord Margath, the dragon. And basically, players are taking their characters and they're going to the cities and they're going to shop to buy items and weapons and armor and different clothing, even. That is all going to boost up their stats and give them more tokens for combat. In this game, you're tossing tokens, you're flipping tokens to resolve combat. You're not rolling dice or card play for combat. It's a very unique combat mechanism. And basically, these tokens represent different items that you have in your possession. So you're trying to gain more because that way you can cast more tokens when you compete with the bad guys, because the bad guys have a good amount of tokens they're casting. So if you have fewer tokens than they do, there's a good chance that you're going to lose those encounters, those battles. And yeah, you're adventuring and questing, and there's 3 different types of adventures. You got combat adventures where you fight bad guys and try to beat them for their loot, for their money. You've got social interactions where you make certain decisions, maybe do some skill tests in order to gain these cards as trophies, or gain some other reward. And you also have questing, where you go to particular parts in the map and explore these parts in the map, and if you explore them, you get whatever reward the card indicates. There's a lot of storyline. You have a story deck that gets flipped every so often, and it just interacts with the main development of the story for the particular overlord or bad guy or boss that's in charge for that particular game that you're playing. And again, you're just trying to do everything you can. You have skill cards, which you're using to add, again, to level up to your character, and you're using the trophies that you acquire throughout the game through the successful completion of different encounters. You're using those trophies to add these skills to your deck. And you're just traversing through the whole game. It has a great travel mechanism where you roll dice, and if you match the terrain types on the board, those are the terrains that you can move for that current turn. Really cool, really fun game. I just always have a blast. It's such an immersive experience whenever I play it. I really get into it. Roombound 3rd edition. And then we have Descent, which is probably the most popular game in the Terranoff line of games. This is the 2nd edition of Descent. I believe they're coming out with a 3rd edition, although they haven't officially titled it 3rd edition. They are reluctant to do so. But Descent Journeys in the Dark is a really cool game, dungeon crawler. It's kind of like the Standard Bearer. I know that Gloomhaven has taken over, but Descent for many years was what dungeon crawler board games kind of measured themselves against. And again, this is the Terranoff universe. Players take on the role of a band of heroes with different classes and different races and different stats accordingly. And they're going on different campaigns. Each Descent box offers a new campaign with lots of different quests that you partake in, and basically a campaign consists of 9 different quests that players go through, and you're trying to defeat bad guys. You have the Overlord player. This is technically a 1 versus all game, although with the app you could play solo or cooperatively, but I personally, I think I prefer it with the Overlord experience, and sometimes when I play solo, I have my own little modified variant in order to continue to enjoy the analog experience. But yeah, this game is really cool. You level up your characters in between quests to get stronger and stronger, but as you get stronger, guess what? The Overlord is getting more powerful too. So the game progresses, and by the middle of the campaign and towards the latter half of the campaign, you the heroes and the Overlord are doing some really cool, interesting, exciting things, and it's just a matter of who's going to be able to accomplish it. And I love the creativity behind each of the different quests. Each of the different quests, yes, there's a lot of similarity and commonalities as far as what you're doing. You're searching for treasure and you're fighting bad guys and defeating them, but there's always a different end game condition, a different end game trigger. So the objective for the Overlord and the objective for the heroes always varies from game to game, and I love that experience. And I love just experiencing a new quest and exploring how that game plays and how your strategy is going to vary from that quest as opposed to a previous quest you might have done, because things that you tried previously may not work this time, right? Sometimes you want to take your time, be more methodical about your approach, and sometimes you really kind of want to race to the finish because the end game condition is like a ticking time bomb and you really want to get to it as quickly as possible. Great, beautiful game, awesome components as far as miniatures is concerned, and a lot of variety with over 7 expansions for this game, Descent Journeys in the Dark. And finally, the last game on this shelf here on the bottom is Battlelore 2nd Edition. So we have a bunch of 2nd and 3rd editions here, and all of these were Fantasy Flight games. Battlelore is basically, this is Richard Bohr's Command and Color system, but it has been taken over with slight modifications made, and the Terranoff IP or theme slapped onto it. So now you have this high fantasy theme in this Command and Colors type game, which I'm a huge fan of the Command and Colors system, all of the historical iterations, and I'm a huge fan of this one as well. Again, I'm a big fan of the Terranoff universe, and I love the deviations that this game has as opposed to the regular Command and Colors system line of games. Besides the fact that you got these fantastical beings that you're controlling, you're either the bad guys or you're the good guys, two sides, asymmetric. But on top of all that, and the different units you have that all do different things, what I like about this game is the lore system. The lore system gives you an additional thing to do. You collect lore tokens throughout the game, and the lore tokens allow you to execute the lore cards, which is a secondary deck in this game. Not only do you have your command deck, which are the cards that you use to give orders and execute commands throughout the battlefield, but you also have these lore cards that allow you to do special things radically different than what the command cards allow you to do, and very thematically integrated. It makes you feel like you're in this high fantasy world. And again, just managing that currency of lore tokens in order to play your lore cards. Because if you have highly valuable lore cards, but you don't have a lot of lore tokens in your supply, then you're not going to be able to afford those lore cards, and they might as well be duds in your hand. And you have this die rolling, because you do dice rolling for conflict resolution in this game, as you do in all the Command and Color games. And there's one side of the die that's basically a dud and would typically be a dud for the CNC games, but for Battle Lore it's not a dud because it gets you a couple of lore tokens. So you're like, you know what, I wanted to kill this unit, I failed, but you know what, I get a consolation prize. I get some of these lore tokens that later on in the game I could use to play down my lore cards. Really cool. If you like CNC and you like fantasy and you like the Terranoff universe, this is a must try. Well, that's it for this episode of my board game collection, Shelf by Shelf. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and also consider clicking on one of the videos you see on the screen right now. Also, don't forget to check in the description down below for a link to our Patreon account and see how you can support this channel and become more involved with the behind-the-scenes process. Research and find a tier that works for you. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.